Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a review for Marvel Animation's Eyes of Wakanda miniseries. It's an animated series on Disney Plus that is set in the world of the MCU and chronicles the adventures of the war dogs throughout history of Wakanda. Um, I want to start off by just saying fuck you, Disney, for releasing this movie, this show, as well as Ironheart, like as a binge model when Marvel has nothing coming out for a fucking while. So it could have been a weekly release, so I don't know why you wouldn't have made it a weekly release. It would have been better like that, so there would be more conversation around it, but it's like you guys are trying to bury or like quietly release things without really promoting much of these black projects. Especially fucking great black projects like Ironheart was good, and then for the audience, no longer talking to Disney, Eyes of Wakanda is a great animated series that shows us some of the history of the MCU through Wakanda's lens and even a kind of Marvel take on a key historical event from our real world, which was really cool. And the way that I would describe like where it is in the canon of the MCU is it's both set in Earth 616, otherwise known as Earth 1999-99, and it's part of the multiverse saga in a small but cool way. And overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this show. I'm going to talk a little bit more on some of the details in just a bit, but I will say that it does have a connective through line that unites the series as a whole, even though it is mostly anthological, where each episode kind of stands on its own. So the first main key point, obviously, is the animation style, which I think is very beautiful and unique from any of the other styles Marvel has used so far. But it might be similar to a couple of other animated series that have come out in recent times, like Arcane, and a little bit, I think, of the very recent Predator Killer of Killers movie on Hulu, which all of the that stuff is really good. So it follows in the footsteps of those. But I don't know if it's necessarily groundbreaking like on its own with its own like super specific visual style. I can't really speak very professionally on this matter, but I feel like the art style of the designs of the characters definitely to me from what I do know um as a non-black person, it seems to follow some like great African artists, whether that's actually from Africa or African American. I'm not sure exactly where I'm like thinking about seeing stuff that is similar, but I do kind of think that that's kind of where some of the design choices came from, which I think is cool if that is what happened. um, and I like it overall. I think it actually kind of works better for me personally, like my visual taste of what I like to see, better than some of that like real world artwork. And I think because it's in motion, and then they do add a little bit more kind of like realistic qualities, whereas some of that artwork is very kind of like abstract or like um geometrical, where it's like really kind of sharp um, shapes that are used for like faces and stuff like that. Whereas this one is more like rounded, like how humans actually kind of look. So yeah, but overall it was really cool, and I liked it a lot. The colors really pop, and the action's really fluid and definitely cool and fun to watch. So I'm gonna talk about the characters, and while I do that, I'm gonna kind of touch on each episode. And there's only four, so it's not gonna be much. But I wanna kind of talk like this will be my main kind of discussion of the series. Um, And I think all of this will be spoiler free because it's such a short series that you should just go watch it and see it for yourself. But episode one focuses on the character of Noni as the protagonist, and she's a Dora Milaje reject who becomes a war dog to stop a Wakandan defector from destroying Wakanda and or the outside world. And this person, the defector, is known as the Lion, but his real Wakandan name is Nakati. And he's a former war dog who has trained other war dogs, I think. And he sees the outside world with that job, and he chooses to remain out there once he kind of gets a taste for it. And he feels like Wakanda is like kind of shackling its people from experiencing the world that he thinks is more liberating than just being in Wakanda, no matter how cool or advanced Wakanda is. He just enjoys that like freedom of traveling the outside world. And I think he kind of starts like a little pirate colony where he takes people from a bunch of different cultures and civilizations into his group, and he's treated as like their king, and he kind of wants to be seen as a god with this Wakandan technology that he has of vibranium and the artifacts that he brought with him out into the world. And that stuff was really cool. Like there's this Viking character, and then I think an Asian character, and then some other characters too that like form his like little posse. And then there's another character in this episode that I think is worth mentioning. Her name is Akeya, and she's the general of the Dora Milaje at this time, who sends Noni on her first War Dog mission um, to go and apprehend or kill the lion so that he doesn't pose a threat. And this episode was pretty cool, but episode two I think was a lot cooler, and that's the one where I was like, yeah, this show is fucking dope. And episode two focuses on the character of Memnon, which is his outside name outside of Wakanda, but his Wakandan name is Bakai, and he's a war dog working in the Greek army during the Trojan War. So that's where the real life stuff comes in, and I thought this shit was really fucking cool. And he's doing it to reclaim a Wakandan artifact that one of the royal people on the like Trojan side of things. Troy I think is a city, right? I don't know who the Greeks were fighting in the Trojan War. I don't know if they are technically called Trojans, but yeah, I haven't touched up on my history too much. I did do some like research on it after watching this episode, which is cool that like this was able to inspire me to do that. And I've always been interested in certain things like that, like especially like ancient civilizations in history, but history was never my strong suit, which was obvious kind of the way I'm talking about it now. But it was cool that that was one of the things I liked about Eternals, which I got a poster for it right there, of how they tied like MCU history with real history, and connected in that cool way that it makes you think of like all the possibilities. It's kind of inspiring in an interesting way. But Memnon is short for Agamemnon, who was the real figure that Achilles, the Greek hero, had like a little altercation with, and we get to see this through Wakanda, where this character is that person from real history. And Achilles in the episode is a close friend of Bakai's, who brought him into his circle when Memnon, who's the name that he tells Achilles that he goes by, seemed lost to him. And Achilles in this episode, the way he's portrayed here, it seems like that's what he does. He kind of like saves people and brings him into his own circle, and they become like a little brotherhood, which is kind of like similar to the episode one thing with the lion. But here I think it's a lot more altruistic, whereas the lion he kind of gets in their heads and like makes them think he's saving them, but he's actually just kind of enslaving them and using them for his own gain. I feel like Achilles is a real heroic figure, the way he's depicted here. It's just that he has like this one person in his ear who doesn't really trust Memnon, and technically he's right, but it gets to the point where Achilles is just like furious about it, and that's where the kind of conflict comes in. And the way that everything played out was really cool. I really liked it. Episode three's protagonist is Basha, who is honestly probably the worst war dog that we've ever seen so far, and who maybe is the first person to bring an outsider into Wakanda, at least on accident. Um, and that outsider, we see, I think, in the trailer, but for sure they released a poster before the show came out. Is an Iron Fist, and this Iron Fist goes by the name of Jorani, and she saved Basha after he crashed in the snowy mountains of China on his journey to reclaim a different Wakandan artifact at a different point in time from episode two. Um, so that's where that comes in, and it's cool that they have finally brought in Iron Fist into the MCU officially outside of the Defenders saga, which now retroactively has become canon. But this is the first time like Marvel Studios themselves are putting an Iron Fist, and this Iron Fist, I believe, was created just for this show. But there are Iron Fist like mantles that are passed down through history, and there are others that have been mentioned, I think, in the Iron Fist series. Obviously, the most recent one was Danny Rand, the White Iron Fist, and then Colleen Wing, I think, becomes like a shared Iron Fist where they share the mantle with Danny at the end of season two of that show. And and then What If also gave us a different Iron Fist that was in the comics, but when he's like a young kid in the Western like cowboy episode of season three of What If. Um, and I forgot that one's name. But then there's also the Marvel Rivals one, Lin Lee, who I'm not sure if he's from the comics or not, but if he's not, then he was created for the game, and he's also a different Iron Fist from like the main one that most people know about, which is Danny. But honestly, Danny Rand's probably the least interesting or cool Iron Fist in my opinion. An Iron Fist should always be Asian. But it was just at the time, they were writing as white men creating this character, so they wrote it in that perspective. But I think in the modern day, Iron Fist should never be Danny Rand. In my own opinion, personally. But some people probably wouldn't like me saying that. There's another character in this episode who's also pretty important, I would say, and his name is Ibo, and he's the captain of the War Dogs, which are actually known as the Hatut Zeraze. I don't know if I said it right. And this guy Ibo, he always covers for Basha when he messes up, because like I said, he's probably the worst War Dog. And there's like a cool kind of growth within this character where this episode was pretty cool. But I think my second favorite after episode two with the Trojan War is the finale episode, which is episode four, and this one kind of has dual protagonists. Um, where I think kind of the most primary one is named Tafari, but he has like somebody who's kind of training him or going along with him on his mission named Kuda. So Tafari, he's a Wakandan prince who feels like since he won't be king because he's the younger of his siblings, so his eldest sibling or brother is gonna be the king. So he's in a place where he feels like he has to discover his purpose out in the world as a war dog, because there's no other place that he feels like is for him within the kingdom. And Kuda is a seasoned war dog who takes Tafari on his first mission in Ethiopia, and he has a family, so he's not like as like looking for excitement out in the field, and he's just more like, we get the job done. If it's like really dangerous, then we don't have to get the artifact that we are on mission to retrieve. as long as we make it home. Like that's his priority. But Tafari, he wants like to be known. Where Kuda has already got into that place where he's kind of like legendary to the people in Wakanda. And Tafari wants to get that, so he's a little bit more reckless, and he just goes out. But the cool thing about this episode is that this episode is the episode that ties to the multiverse saga because there's some time travel involved, and that's why this episode is called The Last Panther because it's about a future Black Panther who, in their timeline, is the last Black Panther because it seems like Wakanda is gonna be destroyed, along with maybe the entire planet because of an alien species that comes to Earth and conquers it, and like destroys it pretty much. Um, so I don't think the last Panther is named, but she is also the Queen of Wakanda in the year 2396. So she's a Black Panther from a possible future who travels back to the point in her timeline that doomed her world once it split from the sacred timeline of Earth 616. So I think all the episodes before this take place and did happen in the main sacred timeline of Earth 616. But this last Panther's timeline was a split future. So it's not necessarily the future that will happen in the MCU, but it's a future. So her goal is to fix it and realign with the sacred timeline. And the way that everything plays out is really cool, and it adds a new absolute point in the sacred timeline of the MCU, which was a concept that was created for What If, and I thought it was a pretty interesting concept, and it's similar to canon events from the Spider Verse movies, but a little bit different, I think. So now I'm just gonna give a ranking of the episodes and just tell you to go fucking watch the show because it was really cool. And I hope they do more. Like they could definitely do another season and just tell more stories where it doesn't have necessarily, in my opinion, have to have like another kind of connected story where the last Panther was like looking at each of these points to find out where things messed up, and then she finally gets here in episode 4 where that's the one that changed things. They could just do other stories from the main like history of the MCU, and even do like present day stuff too, which I think would be cool with Nakia and what other war dogs are existing in the present day MCU. But episode 2 is my favorite, Legends and Lies. It's the Trojan War one. The Last Panther, episode 4, because of the sci-fi stuff, I think was really cool. And then episode 3, Lost and Found with the Iron Fist. That one was a very fun episode. But I liked the introduction of an Iron Fist, and she was really cool. And they had a fun dynamic, especially Basha. He was really funny in his like kind of slow process of getting the job done and the mistakes that he makes along the way. And then my least favorite is probably the first episode, Into the Lion's Den. But that episode did do a good job setting up the series, and it was still enjoyable. So that's all I'll say about the show. Go watch it, and Wakanda forever. Peace.